everyone, welcome to our Gamera vs. Gyaos 50th anniversary. Can you believe it's been 50 years since this film came out? It's just amazing that we have this as, some of us might consider this as one of our favorite Gamera films, or maybe even second favorite. I'd probably say it's one of my top 3 favorites. I'd say maybe even second favorite. But
of the show series.
Actually, no. I actually think it's probably the second. But I don't know. We'll see. We'll get to that conversation as we go along. But some introductions first. My name is Puling. I'm the host of the Monster Report on YouTube. Check it out. Go to YouTube, go to Facebook, Twitter, follow me, and check out the shows. Got some G-Fest stuff on there, some unboxing and review episodes, and all kinds of discussion episodes. And I am joined here by the Kaiju Transmissions, and I'm going to let them plug their podcast, actually. So why don't we start with Matt here? Go ahead.
Hello, everybody. I am Matt Parmely, one of the hosts of the Kaiju Transmissions podcast. We have a Facebook page. You can check us out on iTunes. You can follow us on Twitter at KT_podcast. And Byrd?
I am Kyle Byrd. I am the other host of the Kaiju Transmissions podcast. Again, please follow us on Facebook and all that good stuff. And we've been doing this for a little over a year, right, man? Yeah. And this is also going to be put out as a live recording for our podcast and for the Monster Report here. So, audio-visual will be available.
Okay, awesome. And so, real quick, we'll just go over the plot. We've got some discussion points, and if we have some time at the end, we'll open it up to some Q&A. But as far as Gamera vs. Gyaos, if you haven't seen it, you're probably not here. But since we're probably all Kaiju fans, I'll kind of go over it real quick. If you remember it, of course, the volcanic eruptions happening at the beginning of this film, and it's Gamera is actually brought in as a result. He's the monster that likes fire. Gyaos is the one who doesn't, of course. Gyaos is revealed, of course, in this village, and there's this plot of the village that's I'll explain kind of in a minute. But Gyaos is things are happening in the woods. There's this green glow, of course. They've got to investigate. You got a reporter and a kid that goes out there. Reporter gets eaten. Kids get saved by Gamera. We got the kid's story kind of going along with that. Aichi is his name, and we'll talk about characters as we go along too. But that village story is kind of an interesting one because they're going to lose their homes essentially to the new highway that's being built, the road construction crew, but they're trying to get the best value for their land and all that, so they're causing vandalism, they're stirring up trouble, anything they can do to see if they can get the most amount of money out of their land. They know they're going to eventually have to leave anyway, so there's that kind of going on. Along the way, we've got monster action that's happening all around them. So the military has to intervene. It's interestingly enough, Aichi is the what we call him, the military advisor, isn't he?
Yeah.
Who comes up with 3 plans, I think, through the course of this that the military goes along with. It's like, that's a great idea.
He just happens to be 6 years old.
Yeah. It's like, get him on the payroll. And so, but ultimately Gamera takes the victory at the end because, of course, dragging Gyaos into the volcano, Gyaos and fire don't mix well, but Gamera, he loves the fire. He just soaks in it. He just thinks it's like a sauna, so it's just perfect for him. And as we go along, we've got some really cool slides, behind-the-scenes photos, and some other stuff to show you as well. So, kind of with the plot out of the way, and hopefully we've seen it recently. I actually watched it again last night to just kind of refresh on it, and it was, a great experience watching with my son. And he's here, the son of Nick Adam Puling, Eli. He's playing his phone. Playing with the phone now, he's being quiet. Hey. So, he's in good shape. Gary, thank you.
No problem.
Taking care of it. So, let's talk about the behind the scenes of the scripting of this film. Some things that may have been going on before this film made it to the big screen.
Alright, well, this came out in 1967, which is kind of known as the year of the Kaiju boom. Also in 1967, we had Son of Godzilla, King Kong Escapes, Gappa, X from Outer Space, and even Korea got into the game with Yongari. On TV, there was Ultra 7, there was Johnny Sacco, so it was really just super saturated. Now, as far as this particular movie goes, I guess, originates after the release of Gamera vs. Baragon, which kind of shifted away from the more kid-friendly angle of the original film. It was heavy on the human drama. It was a little longer, and they found that kids, who made up a good portion of the box office intake, weren't paying attention to the movie when it was on. So they were running up and down theater aisles, going to get food, just being disruptive because too much talking, not enough monsters. So Noriaki Yuasa, who directed the first Gamera film, he was demoted to special effects director for Baragon, and he was telling them, because he always was the one that pushed for it to be a kids series, and he said, you know, after Baragon, I don't really think we should do that again. I think we should go back to focusing on the monsters, and eventually that's what brought us another child protagonist, which we'll see from here throughout the rest of the Showa series, to many people's chagrin, I think. So he convinced them to he convinced Dai to let him direct again, and that's where we have Gamera versus Gyaos come in. As far as figuring out what kind of monster Gamera would fight, it's said that Dai was actually inspired by Dracula to come up with Gyaos, who, if you've seen the movie, you know he's more or less a vampire bat kind of creature, and he drinks blood. It's been said that that was kind of an idea that was triggered by them seeing how Toho had made their own King Kong and Frankenstein movies. I haven't seen a whole lot of sources like that, so take it with a grain of salt, but it's worth thinking about.
He only comes out at night.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. He's a vampire.
He's the creature of the night. Yeah.
Yeah. And we'll get into what this movie did to change the course of the series a little bit more.
Okay, so yeah, Matt's going to talk about that because of the last film, of course, Gamera vs. Baragon. Yet not in the same tone, almost not in the same vein of this film, actually. So, Matt, talk about how the change in the direction of this franchise was from this film from the last film.
So after the success of the first movie, basically Dai made Gamera vs. Baragon. They made it what they considered an A-list production. So they had like Kojiro Hongo. They had a huge cast. They had a much bigger budget for the second film than they did the first. And for Baragon, the main responsible party, obviously Noriaki Yuasa, as Byrd talked about, like he was only used for special effects. So instead, Shigeo Tanaka directed the film. And the actual quote from Yuasa is, he was talking about for Baragon, he actually said, many children went to get some food or they just ran through the corridors during the movie. And so they shifted the tone for the second film, and what they said was, they set the movie against a very real historical backdrop, which we're going to talk about here in a second. And the film was scripted by Fumi Takahashi. He wrote the first film as well. And it focuses more basically on Aichi, which is the child protagonist, and it kind of follows the benchmark of the original film, which had another child in it. And obviously, Baragon did not have really any children to speak of. And what you have here is kids are solving adult problems. That is the thematic piece of Gamera that you see that is very different from the Showa Godzilla films. So that is kind of the shift in tone that you see throughout the entire Gamera series. Also, this is the first time that the Gamera theme song appears. Now you see it at the end of the film, and then from this film onward, you're going to see it like 100 times. It'll be at the beginning of every movie, basically, after this. And Dai, actually, the music committee essentially came up with the idea for the theme, but Hidemasa Nagata was the guy that actually wrote the lyrics for it. So this is the first time we have a prominent child protagonist solving adult problems, and he becomes a de facto military advisor, which is what you're going to see throughout the rest of the series. And then that's going to be kind of the common theme, again, that you see throughout this entire movie as well. Plus you have Gamera rescuing him at the very beginning, like 15 minutes in, you're going to see Gamera go out of his way to save his life, actually retreat from battle to save him from Gyaos.
Yeah. And you know, the Gamera theme, of course, yeah, that's like it or not, yeah, obviously it's child friendly. You know, that song that runs through our head because it gets played, you know, so often through that. That's what I was going to talk about. I was going to say, Matt, are you going to sing it for us? You know,
yeah, nobody wants to hear that.
Yeah.
No, that's not.
At least do the Mystery Science Theater version.
Yeah, nobody. My wife doesn't want to hear that when I sing in the shower. So that's not,
Goodness, oh gosh, that song, yeah. But we're going to talk about this film, how we like it personally, what we think about it personally, actually. And Matt, you were kind of already on a roll there. What do you think about this personally? And we'll take it from there.
So I love this movie. It kind of has a special place in my heart, mainly because my kid loves it. Now I might be a terrible parent because he's 3.5, and this movie's kind of violent. But he requests this movie by name all the time. These are actually his 2 Gamera Gyaos figures that I picked up for him.
He's cool with us borrowing.
Yeah, we, well, you know, that's the thing, like, he was like, yeah, I asked, like, can we take these to G-Fest, and he was fine with it. I was kind of surprised. So, for this movie, everything kind of comes together. It's a very well-balanced film. The monsters are kind of always on screen every 10 or 15 minutes. The fights are also very well done. Like, the later Gamera films, they feel very clumsy. Gamera's, like, falling over at times, or he's playing, you know, the xylophone on Zigra, and it's just you don't have that.
He crashes every time he lands.
Well, he does that once in this film too, but it's the fights in this are more well constructed. The set pieces for the most part are good. The only thing I would criticize it for is Gyaos is kind of like always floating in the air at times, and we have a picture later on in the slideshow of the Gyaos prop they use for that. But there's some really good set pieces. The child actor isn't overbearing. You don't have the Kenny factor, we like to call it. The Gyaos is a great villain. I love Gyaos. He's probably one of my favorite monsters. And then Tadashi Yamachi was actually a pupil of Akira Ifukube. He writes this really big, booming score for the film that works extremely well, in my opinion. So the movie opens up and you have this, like, this big boom entrance into the movie. So because of that, like, it just kind of captures your attention right away. So for all those reasons, this is my favorite Showa Gamera film.
Okay. And yeah, you're talking about that score especially, the inspiration for Ifukube. You can really hear it in there. You know, just very in your face, really timed well with what you see on the screen actually, and that's what that really captures a lot about it. But you don't want to hear about what I have to say. I'll say that next. But yeah, go ahead.
I really like this one. Baragon's my favorite, but it's probably my second favorite of the Showa Gamera movies. Baragon kind of exists in a different part of my brain because it's so different. But it's kind of what Matt was saying. This is where everything kind of comes together. You have the child protagonist who can be irritating, but unlike the later films, he's not front and center constantly. Again, Gyaos has become the iconic Gamera villain. This is one of my favorites in the series. Also a great Mystery Science Theater episode. This is one where everything clicks together in a way that I don't think the later films ever recaptured. I think this one has the best balance between the kids stuff and the adult stuff. It's probably the only one that I would say actually has a balance between the two. You know, from after this through the end, it's pretty much 100% kid-centric. That's why I think this one really works. I have effects and art direction and stuff I'll talk about later that I think will really make this one stand out. But so on our podcast, when we rate our movies, we have a rating scale for each thing. So Nick, since you were kind enough to host us today, I'll start with you. What would you pick a rating scale and tell us what you would give it out of 5?
Right, your rating scale, you usually pick something, kind of from the movie that you can use out of 5 somethings, right? Yeah, out of 5. Yeah, and I was kind of thinking of that actually with this film, and one of the things they do to come up with a way to capture Gyaos is they create artificial blood.
Yep.
They actually, they use that, and then the operation, I was actually laughing about that last night. They even come up with the name very quickly to spin Gyaos around on that turntable kind of deal.
Yep.
Operation Whirlybird. And I'm saying they came up with that name really quickly. That was pretty good. Okay, they listened to the kid. He had a great idea, but they came up with the artificial blood, which was ingenious. Between that. So if you were to say, and how many gallons out of 5 gallons of artificial blood, what rating would you give this film?
I would say 3.5. A solid 3.5. It's a fun movie. It's really briskly paced. It suffers from the same kind of nonsense that a lot of the old Gamera movies do, but that's part of its charm. I really like it. So
3.5?
Yeah, 3.5.
Okay.
3.5.
I'm solid 4. Yeah.
Solid 4.
Yep.
Why is that?
I mean, it doesn't have like the Gamera Olympics like Giron does, where he's like swinging on the pole and stuff. It's a fun movie. It's also kind of appeals to kids and adults alike. And Gyaos is awesome.
All right. Yeah. And I'd probably go along the lines of about a good solid 4 too. When you really think about Gyaos as a character, actually, because the monsters are characters too. They aren't props. They are characters that we love or hate. And the Gyaos is kind of Gamera's arch nemesis. When it really comes down to it, he makes reappearances in Giron. He makes his reappearance in the Heisei Gamera series as well, and the Gamera the Brave. And so he keeps coming back, kind of like King Ghidorah. It's like, that's the arch nemesis of Godzilla. It's like you have to, it's almost like if you're going to be doing a big Gamera production, we've got to get Gyaos in there somehow. And so this is kind of that movie that started that, and Gyaos has some interesting kind of characteristics that we learned along the way. And I thought that really made the character of the monster interesting, because they actually took the time to explain why he doesn't turn his head. It has nothing to do with the fact that that's the way the suit's built, and that's the way most suits are built. They can't usually turn their head left and right. They have to turn their shoulders with it. And it's like, no, he has a forked throat. That's how he creates his ultrasonic beam that slices and dices things up. And that's where you get some of the humor in this film, which I love. That the plane getting sliced in half, the car getting sliced in half. Nice enough Gyaos to slice it in half and leave the engine block intact, and that wheel up front, it was still drivable. Even missing the human characters along the way. So it's got that blend of humor, suspense, drama. It's got the human story that's pretty interesting, the kid's story. Even being kind of watching it late at night with the lights low, and you see the TV going kind of crazy, which is like almost an EMP ability that Gyaos has. I think those kind of scenes make a well-rounded, all-over entertaining film. So that's a good way of rating this film. Actually. So let's talk about the characters, actually.
Can you go to slide 34?
34? Sure. Yeah, where you talk about the characters.
So as he's getting the slide up, I'm going to kind of go through just some brief clip notes on the characters. So Kojiro Hongo, who's been in a ton of different movies. He plays Shiro, one of the main characters. He starred in, and this is kind of, Kojiro is actually the guy in the middle. He starred in 3 Gamera films. He actually also has a cameo appearance in Gamera Guarding the Universe as the captain of the Nojima, which is in the opening scene. He was also famous for being in a Daimajin. There's a great story about him faking his illness to get out of, he basically faked being sick to get out of being a Barugan. So, and he ended up being a series regular. So that's kind of a pretty cool thing about him. So the 2 people next to him, obviously you have Narayuki Abe, who plays Aichi, which is our child protagonist, and then you have Ryuko, who plays Sumiko, which is Aichi's sister. So she actually went on to star in Gamera vs. Giron, Gamera vs. Jiger, and she was also famous for being in the Lone Wolf films. So if you're into a lot of those kind of movies, she's great. In the next slide, we actually have a couple of the other actors. The grandfather of Aichi, who was Kujihiro Ueda, he has been in 122 movies, Kurosawa films such as Throne of Blood, Seven Samurai, Rashomon. So he's a fantastic actor. He's been in so many great films. I mean, if you've not seen Throne of Blood, if you've not seen any of the Kurosawa stuff, you need to if you're a fan of Japanese cinema. And then the guy directly to Kojiro Hondo's right, that's Dr. Aoki. He's the guy that he's supposed to be like the zoologist, if you will. He appeared in 4 Gamera films, the original film through Virus. And then, if you go to the next slide, here we have the Gamera suit actor. He played in the Gamera a number of different times, and that's Teru Aragaki. And that's him actually getting in during the water scene, which, as we all know, is very dangerous for these suit actors. So that's kind of a brief overview of who was in the film, the main cast of characters. So I want to talk about, and this is kind of the most interesting part of the movie, because we alluded to the fact that Yuasa set a backdrop to a very real situation. 1967, let me backtrack. In 1964, Japan hosted the Olympic Games. Right after that, they felt they actually needed additional transportation, or international transportation, so they wanted to build an airport. And they wanted to put this airport in Narita. This was supposed to be the biggest public works project in that time period. The problem was they wanted to use the U.S. equivalent of what we call eminent domain, where they go in and they seize land. And the problem with that is that the laws for the U.S. or for the Japanese government to do that are very weak compared to what the U.S. government does here. It's like if someone wants to come and take my house in the U.S., they just have to pay me basically fair market value for my property's worth. In Japan, they have to convince you to give up your land, which can take literally years and years and years. So after that happened, so after World War II, there was a bunch of farmers that were given land. So these were people that either were serving in the war or they were displaced by the war. So think like war veterans coming home from Iraq or something that were given land to cultivate, to farm, or people that were affected by the war families, that kind of thing. They were given land to farm. Now the government wants to take that same land back from them. So rightfully so, they're furious about this, and they decide, you know what, we're not having it, we're not going to go anywhere. So that's the backstory for why the villagers in the Gamera film don't want to give up their land to this expressway company. They don't want to give up their land because they're tired of the government's crap, and they're not ready to give up anything. And the media at the time was painting these protesters, the Japanese government, they were painting these protesters kind of being very crooked, very against protests, or very against progress, I should say. Which is why you have the grandfather as kind of being this like skeevy character. He's only about the money. He's not really looking out for the better interests of the people. It's really just about the money. So from that standpoint, that's kind of the historical backdrop. Now you also have this organization called the Hantei Dome, which is basically what it stands for is the Farmers League against the Narita Airport. Okay. These are people that came together and they organized marches. Now these weren't like protests down the street. They built catapults. Like they were actual catapults they used against police officers, against the people trying to build the airport. They built forts, they built bunkers. They were joined by student activists. They had 24-hour watches. Like this was a full-blown insurrection. Like we would probably call these people terrorists if they were in the US today. So when the government tried to conduct their first land survey in 1967, the year that this movie came out, 2,000 riot police, what they faced were blocked roads, violent protests. By 1971, police were using like water cannons, 3 policemen died. The airport, this project faced so many issues that by 2002, they'd only built 1 runway. That's like 40 years later. So I mean, that's how long this had gone on. And again, it's worth really noting that the media coverage in Japan painted the protesters as being these loony people against progress, trying to stop the government from doing what was right for the country. But in reality, they were farmers just trying to take care of their families. They were displaced from the war, they were displaced from the economy, and all they wanted to do was to keep their families safe. So the movie is in a lot of ways kind of a propaganda piece, if you think of it that way, because at the end of the film, what happens? Everybody makes nice and they go on with the project, but that's not really what happened. There were like 6 people killed, a lot of people hurt, hundreds of people got arrested. So there's a lot of backstory to this movie that you're not really getting. And that's probably the most interesting part about the film, at least for me.
Yeah, I was going to say, actually, the fact is that they're making a social message through their films, and it seems like, in the monster films, between Godzilla with the nuclear bomb and Shin-Godzilla, with everything that was happening after the earthquake, tsunami, and Fukushima, that Japan has no problems with their entertainment industry, going in these kind of directions. So yeah, that human story of the villagers versus the roadway company there, I always found as a kid, of course, I wanted to see the monsters, but as an adult, I watch that and I see that story kind of unfolding. Even with the backdrop of all the monsters attacking them, they're still trying to haggle the price of their land. They're still protesting. They're still, vandalizing all of these things that they're trying to do, and they're still, just being, as overly defiant against this company. So I find that, that story is, making this movie even more interesting as it ages with me, actually, as it grows with me. So. Let's talk about visual effects now, Kyle. So suits, animation sets, everything.
Yeah. Okay. So.
Slides you want me to pull out?
Go back to 2. So special effects from this movie onward would be directed by Kazufumi Fuji, who, according to lore, didn't like being credited as special effects director out of respect to Eiji Tsuburaya, who had really been the king of that up until his death. Effects shooting for a Gamera movie usually took about 2 months. Before we get into Gyaos, because there's a lot to talk about there, we'll talk about our friend Gamera here. To be honest, I've never been the biggest fan of the Showa Gamera suit, especially when he's walking on all fours like that. He always kind of reminded me of like a hamburger with arms and legs. Here he is terrorizing our lead actress, Reiko Kasahara. One interesting thing about this movie in particular is you're familiar with the Showa Gamera movies. They differ from a lot of kaiju movies in that Gamera's heat ray is actual fire, like is in real fire coming out of the mouth, which I imagine must have freaked out pretty much anyone working on the movie during those scenes. For this movie, they actually built a separate torso prop that would shoot the fire, much to the relief of Taro Aragaki, who was in the suit. Another difference that you'll see here, this is the first time in any of the old movies where Gamera only pulls his legs in to fly. The reason for that was because it cut down the cost of gunpowder. So the previous 2 movies when he flies, it's only when he's spinning and he has the jets coming out of all his arm and leg holes. What do you call those? I don't know. So that was a budget cutting procedure. This did have a lower budget than versus Baragon. I don't think any of them had as high a budget as that one. Let's get into Gyaos here. Gyaos, as we've discussed, is the iconic Gamera villain. And he was designed by Akira Inoue, and Inoue's design was brought to life by Masao Yagi, who did most of the suits for the old Gamera films. There's a few different angles of Gyaos in flying form and otherwise. And the thing about Yagi's suits, the suit actors liked them a lot because they were fairly easy to move around in. They weren't too tight or suffocating. The only problem was they were very fragile. So they broke a lot and had to be repaired a lot during filming. With the Gamera monsters, the suits lacked a certain, I guess, I don't really want to say realism, but I would say maybe a certain deep level of detail that a lot of the suits in the Toho films did. They generally have a more, I would describe it as a more cartoony appearance. As you can see by Gyaos here, it's very broad strokes kind of design. One thing that is interesting about Gyaos in comparison to Rodan and a lot of other flying kaiju is that instead of walking around with his wings open all the time, he actually folds them when he's not flying. So for as much grief as people give them about the lack of detail in the actual suit, I mean that's something that I don't think I've seen in any other kaiju film.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think even Rodan was the.
I don't know if he's ever done.
He's ever, when he walks around or crawls, I think he's always just like this. Look at my wings. I'm so great. But yeah, here's Gyaos. Actually, you see him folding up the wings, which would be a natural way that would happen. I think that what was the Jurassic Park that they actually had the pteranodons?
Wasn't that the third one? Yeah.
And you actually could see them. But they were CGI, of course. This is a suit.
Yeah.
So,
I don't know, maybe they just always figured it was too hard to do with a suit.
Which would make sense, but there it is.
So speaking of Gyaos, he has some interesting powers. Most famous is probably his ray, which is described in the movie as a laser scalpel, whatever that means. But iconic and used in, I think, every version of the character. And every time he shot that ray, it cost probably the equivalent of $1,000 to animate. So that just, now you can do that on your laptop, So that's just interesting. The technology from now and 50 years ago is advanced incredibly.
So every time you see that beam, just go cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, just keeps going.
But it gave us a lot of our favorite sequences that we talked about a little bit earlier. Here's the helicopter at the very beginning where he shoots it and the helicopter splits in half. Here's a behind-the-scenes photo. We got a guy tinkering around in the middle there. That comes out of what is actually one of my favorite effects in the movie is that Gyaos' cave has this eerie kind of green glow. It's what Mystery Science Theater called the mint jelly effect. When you see that glow, either in the miniature set or even when they're standing around in the live action set, it has a real eeriness to it that, again, I think that's another thing I like about this movie is that, for as silly as it is, like the scene where the boy and the reporter are in the cave, it has like a creepiness to it. A lot of it is because of that art direction, and then of course when he walks out and then he starts floating, and you see later he's eaten by Gyaos. And also, of course, here's that car cut in half with the engine intact, and there's Reiko Kasahara kind of goofing around in that little split car set, and there's another behind-the-scenes photo of the monsters and the actors kind of goofing around. And we did mention earlier that the Showa Gamera movies are pretty brutal in their monster violence, which probably confused a lot of parents and kids at the time. Of course, Gyaos would return versus Giron, and he would be dismembered pretty awfully, like Evil Dead kind of dismemberment. But yeah, this is the movie where you really start to see a lot of that. There's a little bit in Baragon, but this is the first time Gamera bleeds. And I would imagine that the suits had little bladders or things in them that would allow for those gushing blood effects. The battle scenes are a lot of fun. I'm going to kind of disagree with Matt a little bit here in that I think the aerial battle in the middle of the movie is pretty silly. We have this thing doing all the work. It can't move. It can't move at all. There's one part in particular where it's just floating in the air and it's like turning to like kind of follow Gamera wherever he's going. But aside from a pretty stiff mid-air battle, there's a lot of good stuff in here. Some of my favorite moments are when Gamera pulls his head and his arms and legs in and rolls down the mountain to kind of like try and steamroll Gyaos. The other one is towards the end where Gamera throws the rock into Gyaos' mouth to like block his ray, and it gets stuck there. Of course, when he bites off the foot, that regrows later. As far as the miniature effects, I actually think the miniature effects are a pretty significant step up from the previous movies. My favorite scene is Gyaos' rampage in Nagoya, which here you see him in the middle of this really fabulous miniature set. Again, he uses that ray to cut Nagoya Castle in half. There's him flying over the castle.
You can actually see the wire prop hanging over top of him right here.
Yeah, that's probably my favorite. Just in general, the art direction of this whole movie is great. This is, of course, when they fight along the mountainside. Again, great miniature set here. Just really well done, and you know, as much flack as I'm giving the suits for lacking detail, I think the miniatures in a way kind of make up for it. The thing about Daiei was, unlike Toho, they didn't have an established effects department. So they were kind of learning as they went along. You know, the first few movies, they were outsourcing effects technicians and model makers from Toho and other companies. And like a lot of things, I mean, we were talking about just with the script and the characters and monster action. I think that this is where the miniature effects and everything really click together well, also. And of course, we have in here somewhere, yeah, here's that turntable set that we talked about where they put the fake blood in the, oh, nope, yep, there we go. They put the fake blood in the turntable to trap him. So there's Operation Whirlybird.
There it is.
This is actually the scene where Gamera is dragging Gyaos up the volcano. It's actually a little proper. They had him like a little train car basically where he's getting pulled up the set. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, try to hide it with miniature trees and whatever else you can do to cover that up. But yeah, that made for a really good shot.
Yeah. I don't know, there's some other behind the scenes
That's
photos.
kinda cool,
Like this is a really good one that that shows them shooting the scene where Gamera bites off Gyaos' foot. So that's really all I really wanted to say on the effects. Matt, did you want to pick up with the additional materials that we had?
Yeah, let's go to slide 37 real quick and we'll talk about Gyaos for a bit. So this is a close-up of the Gyaos suit. As you can see, Byrd talked about kind of how it's, you know, compared to some of the Toho suits, it's a little less detailed. That's when he's kind of hiding behind the mountain. You can see they got like what looks like kind of like a bed or whatever, but it's less detailed. And then if we go to the next slide, we have this is one of the flying props. So it's a very basic, you know, kind of one prop. And if you watch the film, I mean, it just does this basically very static throughout the entire movie. And then if you go to the next slide, Nick, this is some concept art that we found. This is kind of what they envisioned the battles to be like. So you can see they actually changed the sonic beam or whatever, the sound beam, to being from very kind of where it would actually open up to where it would be very focused. So that was something that they changed later on. So one thing I want to point out too is Gyaos has obviously appeared in a lot of different films. So we have a picture here where in the next movie, Gamera vs. Guron, this is Space Gyaos. And then we actually have another picture which is, apparently they were supposed to be two. We don't know. This is just kind of a production still where you have the flying prop and then you actually have the repainted suit that they used from the previous film. And then in the next still, we have a scene where all three monsters are appearing together, Gyaos in the background.
That never happened.
Yeah, we never see this in the movie. But Gyaos appeared in Gamera vs. Guron, obviously super monster from stock footage. Gamera Guarding the Universe appeared in Gamera 3, and then obviously Gamera the Brave. I believe he appeared in Gamera 4, which is the fan film as well.
It's also worth mentioning that the Heisei Gyaos was one of the inspirations for, if anyone here is a fan of Attack on Titan, the way that the Titans eat people.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Well, and it's funny, you see the multiple Gyauses, you know, in this shot, the fact that they came up with that idea for the Heisei Gamera series, that there were multiples of them. So, you know, whether they built multiples, you know, in the beginning there, because I wonder if they repainted the original Gyaos suit to give it that chrome
Yeah, the chrome with the little...
Yeah, or if it was an entirely new suit, and since this is black and white...
Yeah, I'm actually not really sure.
And since it's black and white, we can't really tell. But, what about that? What about thinking of a film that, could have been during this time? It's just interesting to think about some of the lost films of the time. This whatever film could have been, whether this is Giron or a different kind of film. But, just some really cool things to show there, so... what else do you have actually for us?
So now we're going to go into the manga for the movie, which has some differences. So the movie starts out, or the manga starts out pretty much similar to the movie. Gamera shows up because of an erupting volcano, and then if we go to the next little panel, Gyaos kind of immediately shows up, and he eats a construction worker, which you can't tell, but if you look at the very bottom of the screen, you see his hat falling. So Gyaos shows up, and he eats the guy, the hat falls, it's kind of implied that he gets eaten. And then in the next slide, it's kind of hard to tell what's going on. What you have is the guy to the far left of yours, of my far left. Basically, that's a stand-in for the village, the village elder, and basically all of the people in the movie. That's supposed to be as far as I can tell, like his daughter. Gyaos immediately attacks and takes her, and as far as I can tell from the manga, he eats her. So that's a different take on everything that we see from the film. And then if you go to the next slide, Gamera immediately attacks Gyaos with fire. They battle, and instead of shooting Gamera's arm, he actually shoots Gamera's foot. So we'll see the repercussion of that in the next slide. You see the cut to my top right, and then you see the sun come up, and then obviously you're going to see Aichi over there. He kind of notices that, just like he would in the film, where he's going to point that out. And then if we go to the next slide as well. So there you have Gamera with the foot in his mouth. He's biting that, and they're kind of engaging in battle. What you'll notice here is this is taking place all on land. This isn't water. That's kind of a different from the film. Gyaos is trying to fly away, and then the very next shot. If we go right, this is what it looks like in the film, and then you go to the next shot here. That's what it looks like in the manga. You have Gamera actually with the foot in his mouth. Then we have Operation Whirlybird. So it's a smaller vat of blood. Gyaos actually has to bend over and get it. He lands on top of the hotel. He flies around. He lands, and then this is what it looks like in the film, where he stands basically right over top of it, just kind of bends over his head. And then when they start moving it around, Gyaos looks like he's basically puking or something. I'm not sure what's going on here. Maybe he had a rough night, like a lot of people G-fested from drinking. I don't know. This is different. This is the village elder trying to take revenge for his daughter, and so he climbs up on top of this tower, and he stabs him in the eye.
Oh,
so that's something that's different. He never dies from this. He ends up escaping actually. So he stabs Gyaos in the eye. Gyaos then eventually escapes from the tower, and now you have the climactic battle. Gamera shows up, and he actually breaks Gyaos' wing. He flies directly through it, which prevents Gyaos from further escaping. And then basically from this point on, you see the kind of climactic battle. Gamera scorches him with fire, and then you have the next scene. Gyaos is basically just burning to death.
Gyaos and fire don't mix.
Yeah. And then basically he incinerates him and flies off. So that's the mangas. I mean, they're similar, but there's some differences.
Like a lot of the movies, the manga, they can draw whatever. They don't have to worry about budget. So a lot of the time they're actually kind of cooler than the actual product.
They can go in a real dark area actually too.
Yeah,
so.
Gamera.
Here we see Gyaos' face just melting as Gamera flies away triumphantly.
So yeah, you gotta check out the manga sometime, because this is really cool stuff. And you see there in that slide, it looks like a kid singing the Gamera theme song as it's flying away. So we're all doing that in our head actually. That's what
poor Gyaos is just burning alive.
That's pretty horrific, honestly.
Yeah. So all right, well we actually have a few minutes.
We got 5 minutes, I guess.
So maybe we'll open it up to a few questions or comments. Maybe anyone has.
Do we have any questions? Anything?
Here.
How rare is that manga? Is it?
Yeah, you found it.
Yeah, Matt, you have this.
Yeah, I actually have that. That's from the Gamera. There's a Gamera picture book that I got. I could actually look it up and tell you which one it's from. But it was a reproduction they included in the Gamera picture book. and I can tell you which one if you.
Is this the only one that they had in there, or did they have other movies as well?
It's called, so that's from the Kaiju-Gamera Treasured Photo Album. Actually, let me backtrack. So most of the pictures we got are from the Kaiju-Gamera Treasured Photo Album, and one of the mangas from one of the books that we reference is actually just a reprint of the original manga, and they included it in the very back of the book.
Okay.
I've never seen that particular manga sold because it came out with a movie, so I would say it's fairly rare. But what I have is just a black and white reprint.
Okay.
It's really interesting, storybook there. So, any other questions, comments? Wade? Oh, yeah, okay, right here. Then you. Over here.
Did you guys notice the plot hole Gyaos was first?
The what? Sorry.
The plot hole, when Gyaos was created with a volcano, and yet that's his weakness.
I guess, or if he was unearthed or awakened maybe by it. I guess it didn't really.
Yeah, they don't really.
Yeah, they never.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting that you bring up the volcano. As far as I know, that was really just used as an excuse to get a monster, just because at the time there were a lot of earthquakes and volcano eruptions, and that was just kind of, I guess, lip service to what was going on in real life.
That's a way to bring Gamera to that scene, of course. So that's one of the ways. But yeah, maybe it was just a way of unearthing him, actually. So yeah, Godzilla guy in the black shirt in the back. Yeah.
Why does Gyaos shoot poison?
Oh yeah, when he stops Gamera from flying.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, we actually forgot to talk about that because this is the only time he ever has that power in any of the films that he's appeared in.
Well, it's interesting that he's got flame dousing fog, and that's something that he uses as something to take advantage because they try to burn down the forest.
Which actually is used pretty creatively in the aerial battle when he uses it to put out Gamera's jets and then they crash into the water.
I think for the show Gamera films, if you ever watch them, the director always kind of makes a couple things. He makes it a way for Gamera to basically be physically hurt, because Gamera can't be hurt by fire, so he has the enemy have an ability to hurt Gamera. So I think it's just a way for them to make the battle go against Gamera. And one of the other themes for the Gamera films is Gamera always loses the first battle and then comes back stronger and finds a way to win. So I think it was just a way to do that. I don't think there's actually like a specific reason for it. It was just one of Gyaos' abilities that could basically best Gamera.
It kind of raises the stakes, and actually in a way that even some of the Godzilla movies don't always do.
Yeah. And I was going to say also about that, he's got that EMP ability, which doesn't really get explained, but while Gyaos is around, the lights flicker and the TV's, kind of going in.
That's another spooky scene where, and that's one of the few times in any of these movies that you actually see the child character actually act scared, like a real child.
It's all about the atmosphere.
Yeah.
It's about how scared he is about what might come. And actually, I always kind of said Gyaos has inspired other monsters by his design. When you look at the Mutos of the 2014 Godzilla, that kind of angular face. He's got an EMP ability as well. So there's a lot of inspiration that all the Kaiju have had. From one to the next to the next to the next, and here we are. Here in 2017. What's the next Kaiju? Yeah.
About that fun weakness that Gyaos has, does it, and how similar it is to vampire?
So what about its weakness? Sorry.
How it's similar to vampire.
Oh, it's similar. Yeah.
The sun kills him.
Yeah. Doesn't like sunlight.
Yeah, I just think it was like Byrd's kind of talked about it. They derived the origin from basically, as far as we can tell, the inspiration for the creature was derived from vampires, and that was. Well, we couldn't find any specific sourcing on that, correct?
Not especially, but I mean, I'm not sure.
It seems pretty obvious though.
Yeah.
And it's really cool to see, like, he starts turning red.
Yeah, he's got that cool red glow.
Yeah, it's kind of showing that he's dying from the sun and all that kind of cool. Yeah, I think we got one more, so this is going to be the
last question.
What's the point of having a split spine? Whatever it was.
The slit throat?
Yeah.
What do they
He's got a tuning fork, essentially, is what they say.
So he's
Pseudoscience psychobabble.
Definitely pseudoscience, yes. So yeah, the idea that somehow he's creating that ultrasonic frequency.
This is that the sound portion comes in from one and like the heat portion comes in from another, and I think it's really just they were like, oh crap, this thing can't move its neck. We should come up with a reason why.
But yeah, that's the only time they've ever come up with a reason
Oh yeah,
why.
yeah. At least they tried.
A lot of the kaiju can't turn their head.
Well, we had Tom Kitagawa who played Godzilla on our podcast, and he was saying the first time he could play Godzilla and move the head, it was like the best thing of his life, because that's really a pain for these suit actors to not be able to move their neck.
Think about that. Every time you have to turn, you're moving your whole shoulders with it. So yeah, that's one of the first times and only times you'll hear that explanation. So thank you all for being here. I'd like to thank my co-hosts Kyle and Byrd from Kaiju Transmissions.
I'm Matt.
Yes.
Kyle Byrd, Matt Parmely, and I'm Nick Puling from the Monster Report. We will have this episode on YouTube and on their channel actually as well on iTunes.
Yes, so if you like what you heard, you can look up the Kaiju Transmissions podcast on iTunes and Google Play and Facebook. And of course, as always, I'm sure many people know by now, Nick has the Monster Report on YouTube. And Matt has some cards.
Yeah, we have some business cards we'll be handing out at the back if you're interested, which gives you all the information. But we also have some T-shirts if anybody's interested. We have like 7 T-shirts. We have XL, 2XL, and I think some larges left. They're free. So if you want to like represent or something, hey, come see me. All right.
All right.
Thank you very much.